Right, Dragon will be docking to the international docking adapter, which is attached to that pressurized mating adapter, PMA, as you might hear it called as we're listening into calls on the nets. A fun fact that both of the international docking adapters actually flew up on previous Dragon CRS missions. So the adapter on the V-bar. So that's, if you imagine the windward direction, as Dan had mentioned earlier, of the space station traveling through, that is where the Dragon capsule today will be targeting for docking. And actually, it's only been used once before for the Demonstration 1 mission, when that vehicle docked to space station.
Yeah, we have 2 of those docking adapters on the station right now. We're once again using that one in the forward part of Node 2. The other one is on a pressurized mating adapter on the zenith part of Node 2. Zenith is just the space-facing side of the International Space Station. So if you're inside and just looking up away from planet Earth, you're looking zenith. And so we'll have 2 docking adapters available for any vehicles using these international docking standards. And that's obviously the Crew Dragon, which is also a version of it going to be carrying cargo up on SpaceX's resupply missions in the future. And then somewhere down the road, we'll have the Boeing Starliner. So, I mean, we'll be in a reality where we could have 2 brand new spacecraft docked to the International Space Station at the same time. Could even have 2 Dragons there at the exact same time. We haven't used that Zenith port yet. We will have to down the road inevitably, as one thing that we're going to be looking to do is something called direct handovers. And so right now we do a lot of indirect handovers on the International Space Station, where you have one group leave, and for a period of time you only have 3 people on board, and then until another group shows up. With direct handovers, you can have 2 vehicles docked at the same time, and so you don't have those long periods of only having about 3 crew members on board. We've only had 3 crew on board since Expedition 62 ended, with Chris Cassidy the only U.S. crew member on board right now.
Yeah, so I'm sure he's excited to have 2 more U.S. crew members join him. People I'm sure he's trained with, and people. He actually flew right with Doug on the last, not the last STS mission. You mentioned mission he flew with him.
Yeah, Cassidy flew with Doug on STS-127. That was back in 2009.
Dragon SpaceX for 3 items.
Just give us 1 second up here, and we'll be right with you.
Copy. Sounds great.
So I think the core there giving Dragon a call, probably for that rendezvous completion, and then some words about what they'll be stepping into next.
Again, the core right now is Anna Manon. She's going to be the one on console here for all of our approach and docking maneuvers coming up over the next several hours. She's the one talking directly to the crew, Bob and Doug on board Crew Dragon, doing that from Hawthorne Mission Control right behind us. Core, a brand new position in human space flight. This is the first mission it's been used on, so we've had a couple cycle through already, just going through their different shifts with the different control teams as they shift around. As, I mean, when we have humans in space, we're pretty much going around the clock. I know that the...
Go ahead for those 3 items, Anna.
At this point, you are go to stow the floater camera, and I have the burn time for approach initiation when you are ready to copy.
Houston, no 2 forward hatch open. Station, we copy, no 2 forward hatch open.
Stow the floater, and we're ready to copy.
The burn time for approach initiation is 1209 UTC. Note that you will see approximately 1213 for the time in your displays, but we expect it to trend towards 1209.
Okay, new time for AI, 12:09. We'll see 12:13 on the displays, but it'll trend back towards 09. How copy?
Good copy. And I thirdly have a request regarding the handheld gas detectors when you're ready to copy.
Josh, a couple days ago we had a question whether or not the hatch holding mechanism was in there, and it is. We had previously grabbed a
We have a request for you to please turn on the fire detector handheld gas detectors. Those are numbers 1 and 2.
Copy that.
And report readings of CO, HCl, and HCN. Then turn the draggers off, confirm they are off, and restow.
Okay, we'll turn on detectors 1 and 2. We'll get CO, HCl, and HCN readings, and then we will turn them off.
Thank you so much.
All right, so the core here in Hawthorne, just running down a couple of items with Bob and Doug. One of the ones right at the top is that next big milestone that we're really looking out for, and that's that approach initiation burn. Before that happens, we'll get into the integrated operations between the team here in Hawthorne and the team out in Houston.
Yeah, that's right. The integrated operations really represents a close partnership between the operations teams in both sites. And that's because we're getting really close to space station. So we want both the teams in Hawthorne who are able to control the Dragon spacecraft and give real-time updates to how it's performing and how the systems are functioning. We want them to be completely synced up with the International Space Station, and the space station also needs to be ready to go to allow approach initiation to enter into the approach ellipsoid around the space station.
And speaking of the space station, we're getting some live views inside of Node 2. We just saw him on screen. He's floating out to get some tools for the actual hatch operations for Dragon, but this is a live view inside the International Space Station. We'll see Expedition 63 Commander Chris Cassidy in there getting the hatchway open. You can see kind of at the very far end a space that looks like it kind of dips down and then goes to a small white hatch. That's the pressurized mating adapter. So that's the attachment point, really, along with the International Docking Adapter between Dragon and the International Space Station. So there's a small corridor that's now exposed. Chris opened up the hatchway on Node 2 to open that up and begin circulating air through it. And there we can see him floating once again into screen. Or actually, that looks like Russian cosmonaut Anatoly Ivanishin, who's just going to be assisting with some of the hatch opening ops. But Chris Cassidy is going to be our prime. He's been training for this on board, and we're going to see him quite a bit once we get to that hatch opening in just a couple of hours.
Yeah, and you mentioned, circulating some air in there. I think that's something that here on Earth we take for granted. Yeah. The combination of convection on Earth and just fans moving air around, and also gravity and stratification of the density of fluids. So carbon dioxide being a little more dense than nitrogen and oxygen that primarily make up air. Really allows that carbon dioxide to sort of get out of the way. On Space Station, it is an enclosed space, so all of the carbon dioxide that the crew are breathing out.
Dragon SpaceX, there is an OOP burn coming up in 7 minutes.
Dragon copies.
So core letting the crew there know about the upcoming out-of-plane burn. But as I was saying, the carbon dioxide will tend to build up unless there are fans and filters to capture that. So the circulation step here is to try to get some of that air circulating, make sure that there's no unexpected or sort of stale air in that hatch. And actually, Dragon has similar measures on the spacecraft to make sure it's circulating air and cleaning up that cabin environment for Bob and Doug.
Sorry, I'm trying to hold it together for a minute. We heard them call it the OOP burn, and my colleague just said OOP. There it is. The OOP is the out-of-plane burn, and as we described, as they've made all of these careful approach burns.
Dragon SpaceX, we are also less than 2.5 hours to the earliest docking time.
Dragon, detector readings, if you're ready to copy, Anna.
I am ready to copy.
For the detector 1, L reading is 0.0. Detector 2, the CO is 8 parts per million, and the HCN reads negative 0.4 parts per million. How copy?
I copied HCl 0.0, CO 8 parts per million, HCN negative 0.4 parts per million.
Good copy.
Thank you so much.
We will turn them off and then put them back in volume 14.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the core, Anna, they're letting the crew know to do a quick functional test of the handheld gas detectors. We have a few of those on board Dragon. If there were to be some kind of an anomaly on board the spacecraft, they help the crew diagnose whether there's any kind of an emergency situation. And just doing a quick check, making sure they're functioning as intended.
Yeah, we heard them checking for 3 different ones, and they were HCN, hydrogen cyanide, HCl, hydrogen chloride, and CO, carbon monoxide. And again, these are detectors. They are in a closed environment, so all of their atmospheres in there with them. So onboard Dragon, and also once they're onboard station, there are always a number of detectors set up throughout, just looking for any trace contaminants, as we call them. So any very tiny bits of any of these substances that are used in spacecraft for anything from cooling the vehicles, being fuel, refrigerants, things like that, just to make sure we always have a safe breathing atmosphere through that life support system for our crew members on board. So yeah, they went through, we heard a confirmation just on our side from our life support officers in the control rooms, everything at the expected values, no concerns, and they were able to switch those detectors back off.
Yeah, and shortly here, actually, the crew, so once we get the go-ahead to do the approach initiation, the crew will also begin to don their suits. So those cool suits that they had on during the ascent portion, they'll put those back on, go through some leak checks on those suits, make sure that they're good to go, because they are getting pretty close to the space station. It's a relatively dynamic phase with a number of burns and attitude, thruster movements of the spacecraft to try to make sure you're completely centered and pointed relative to the International Space Station. So we just want the crew to be safe in their suits in case anything were to happen. They're safe and ready to go, and those suits can provide nitrogen, nitrox, which is a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen, or pure oxygen, to the suits if the pressure were to get low enough in the cabin.
But meanwhile, we are counting down to another burn. This is going to be a really small adjustment coming up in about a minute. It's an out-of-plane burn just to really fine-tune their path and set them up for that approach initiation. Only going to be changing their velocity by about 0.66 meters per second. So again, just a really slight adjustment to the Dragon spacecraft's velocity as we get closer to that approach initiation burn, which is when things are really going to start to pick up. And again, we're tracking that in under an hour from now at about 5:09 a.m. Pacific, 12:09 GMT. So we'll stand by for one more burn. Again, we'll wait to hear out once it starts. This one's planned to be about 40 seconds in length. Again, firing those Draco thrusters to begin moving Dragon just a little bit closer, just fine-tuning its path right now before we get to approach initiation.
Yeah, and actually from we saw during the 5 sort of big burns that happened earlier in the mission that the Dragon spacecraft reoriented itself. So it did what we call a slew maneuver to try to get those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters, the ones that are underneath the nose cone, or rather protected by the nose cone during the ascent portion, to get those Draco thrusters to provide most of the momentum to the spacecraft. For most of the burns going from here on, we'll actually be using the service section thrusters. So there are 12 Draco engines that provide attitude control and small thruster corrections as we make these fine-tuned approaches to the space station.
And I mean, just watching the data, it's been all service section Dracos for this burn so far.
When they get to that 220-meter hole, which the crew are going to command, then the crew aboard are going to do a quick manual piloting test. They actually did one of these in the far field, which just refers to being relatively far away from station. In this case, Bob and Doug will issue some commands using those touchscreen displays in the Dragon spacecraft to a few quick bursts of translational thruster fire. So what that means is if you imagine Dragon pointed at the space station, they're going to go left, go right, go up and down a little bit. And then once they've confirmed that they're able to issue those commands, they'll switch it back over to Dragon for final approach. There'll also be a go no-go poll there from the joint operations team, Hawthorne and Johnson, before that happens.
Yeah, and we'll have that final hold once we get into waypoint 2, and Dragon will only be 20 meters away from the space station, so it'll be lined up perfectly in front of that docking adapter at the very forward port of Node 2, the Harmony module. It'll hold at that 20 meters. Shiva said we'll do a go no go poll, and then they'll get to go to press in. Dragon will approach extremely slowly. And it's going to slow all the way down to about 1/10 of a meter per second or even slower as it does this final approach. At one point, we may hear something called CHOP, or crew hands-off point, and this is just a call out for the crew to know that they should not be sending any commands, because at that point, the Dragon vehicle would be the only one able to make any aborts out of that zone, and that's literally when we're just about 2 meters away from the space station, so when we're really close. We'll get that initial contact and capture, which we were tracking for about 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, or a little under 3 hours from now. And then they'll wait for the relative motion to damp out, and then they'll begin to retract that soft capture device and get a hard mate, and we'll get the docking complete call. Meanwhile, though, we're getting some views back inside of station. Chris Cassidy getting everything ready for his crewmates, Bob and Doug, who are about to be arriving on board, hopefully in the next 3 hours.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit about the docking maneuvers there. When we get to the actual stage of docking the vehicle, Dragon has a docking structure on the top of the vehicle that's normally protected by the nose cone during the ascent portion. Now, of course, the nose cone is open, and those the sensors and the docking system underneath it are exposed to space. And so on that docking ring, there's actually 3 pedals that'll interface with the international docking adapter. They've got a ton of sensors and switches on them that'll detect whether we've made good contact with the space station. And then, of course, both the spacecraft are going, really fast. They may have small relative motions in between them. So the docking system for that first soft capture will actually damp out some of that relative motion. And once that motion is damped out and both the space station and Dragon are stable dynamically, then we'll actually retract the soft capture hooks. Dragon will get pulled in towards the IDA, and then a set of 12 hard capture hooks on the ring will interface with the docking system and confirm that good hard seal. And that'll create something called a vestibule between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. It's like the nose cone at the top left corner of it. Right now, Dragon is about, if I can pull up some data, just about 11.5 kilometers from the space station.
Approach initiation. We will be enabling the maneuver shortly, and our updated expected maneuver start time is 12:11 UTC.
So Dragon getting really close. It's getting really exciting now.
We just heard we have the go for the approach initiation burn.
Dragon, SpaceX, how copy?
That's coming up in about, let's see here.
We got an updated time. We're expecting that to start at about 5:11 now a.m. Pacific, 12:11 UTC.
Yeah, so less than 20 minutes away.
In SpaceX on the big loop, we copied 12:11. How do you hear?
I hear you loud and clear. Good copy.
We tried you twice on Dragon to ground with no response. That's why we called you on the big loop.
Copy. I did not hear you on Dragon to ground. We will look into that. Thanks.
All right, so Dragon really starting to come into view. Right now we're just about 10.7 kilometers away, 6.7 miles. And we should be just about 15 minutes away from the start of this approach initiation burn. We are waiting to hear confirmation the crew is getting through their suit up steps. But moving closer to this approach initiation burn, it's going to be about a 90-second firing of the thrusters just to bring Dragon well inside of that approach ellipsoid. They're going to be only 400 meters directly below the space station, so we'll start getting some pretty spectacular views as it begins to close in on the station. Well, there's a view. This is a camera overlooking the exposed facility, so that's one of our fun facts. Both Chris Cassidy and Doug Hurley flew on STS-127, which delivered that facility to the International Space Station. They're just going to continue to close in those, so this will be their second time flying together. Chris hasn't flown with Bob Behnken before, but the two did transition the leadership role in the astronaut office, with Chris taking over from Bob once he was assigned to go off and begin training for these commercial crew flights.
Your screen now is a view of Dragon. You're starting to be able to distinguish the features a little bit more. The left side there, that semicircle, is actually the nose cone, and you can start to see the aerodynamic fins on the service section. Those small little blips at the top and bottom of the spacecraft. I'm sure these features are all going to get much, much better as we get closer and closer to station.
Cameras from station continuing to track Dragon. We are waiting for the confirmation from the crew on that suit of activity. They did start that a couple of minutes ago, and at this point we're about 7.5 minutes, or a little bit closer to 8 minutes at this point, away from that approach initiation burn.
Yeah, right now Dragon's flying actually over the South Atlantic, in between sort of South America and Africa, sort of over the ocean.
It looks like we're getting it in focus now. You can see the nose cone pointed to the bottom left corner. You can see it exposed right in the center, the smaller dark circle of Dragon. That's the docking ring that is going to be used to attach Dragon to that international docking adapter once it begins that final approach and initial contact.
And if you're trying to get your sense of bearings here, the nose cone actually opens away from the side hatch. So the hatch that Bob and Doug entered the spacecraft through on the crew access arm, and if you've had a chance to tune in to our live events with them on the capsule, they've shown that side hatch. That's on the opposite side of that nose cone. So you can imagine Bob and Doug and their seats are facing towards that side hatch. And so that's where they would be sitting once they're complete with suit donning and once they've stepped into those leak jets of their suits. The very top in that ring that Dan had mentioned, so along that ring are the 4 forward Draco thrusters. That's what we were using for those 5 burns that happened earlier over the past 16 hours of this mission. And right in the center there is the forward hatch. So hopefully only a few hours away from seeing Bob and Doug climb through that and aboard the International Space Station to meet their colleague Chris Cassidy aboard.
Yeah, just a couple of steps coming up after this approach initiation burn. They'll do what's called a mid-course burn, so just kind of a mid-course correction that's already programmed in. That comes about 25 minutes following the actual approach initiation burn itself. And then prior to them getting to waypoint 0, which is about 400 meters directly below the station, the teams will go ahead and do a go, no-go to enter the keep-out sphere. And again, that's that imaginary sphere with a radius of 200 meters around the station. They won't cross into that keep-out sphere until after their manual flight test when they're moving into waypoint number 2, but they'll do that go, no-go just before they're even at waypoint 0. Again, waypoint 0 could be a hold point, or if everything looks good with Dragon, they'll continue right on past it. So they'll swing up initially to that spot just 400 meters directly below station, and then they'll conduct another maneuver to go right out in front of station. So they'll go right up in front and line Dragon pointed directly back at the station itself and lined up with that hatch.
I definitely didn't dock the first time I tried it. I don't know if you had better luck, Dan.
No, I could lie and tell you I did, but it did take me 3 tries. I think I made the same mistake as everybody. That first try just ended up going in way too fast. That second try tried to over adjust, and all of a sudden I was spinning backwards. And you really learn that just the tiniest adjustments when you're in a spacecraft and you're flying in microgravity can have a really big effect on the vehicle. And you just kind of have, if you start to turn left, you need to turn right just to make sure you kind of null it out or stop that motion. Otherwise, you're just going to keep on going. Same thing as when you're doing that approach. You have to slow down. There are very slow speeds that are acceptable for the docking. They'll be going right around 1/10 of a meter per second when they make that initial contact and capture, so extremely slow. If you're doing the simulator, you can pick up speed pretty quick, and then you have to start slowing down pretty quick because you'll move in, and you have to constantly be thinking about all of the different...
SpaceX Dragon, com check from the CDR in suit.
And we did hear confirmation that the AI burn, the approach initiation burn, is in progress. Again, this is about a 90-second firing of those thrusters on the Dragon spacecraft.
Dragon SpaceX on big loop, burn complete, nominal burn. Reminder to review your impulsive retreat recovery cue cards if desired.
Copy, nominal burn on the big loop. We will review our cue cards.
So Anna Menon, the core there, giving the crew some insight that the burn was completed nominally. As Dan had mentioned, there is that mid-course correction. And Anna had mentioned impulsive retreat cue cards. Bob and Doug have the ability to issue commands to Dragon if they see anything that's unsafe. So of course on those 3 displays that they have between the 2 of them, they can see the rate of the vehicle, how quickly they're closing, and they have a set of criteria that they're looking for to make sure that they're safely approaching the station. So Anna just giving them a heads up that they should review that criteria if they so desire, so they feel fully confident before the mid-course.
And here's a really cool view. So on the right is a view from station looking at Dragon. On the left, a view from that camera, that thermal camera on Dragon looking back at station. So it's continuing to close in. It's about 6.5 kilometers or just over 4 miles away. That AI burn, that approach initiation burn, was done successfully, reported up to the crew and the teams down here on the ground. They're going to do a mid-course burn, so just about midway through their track up to 400 meters below the space station. That'll come in about 23 minutes from now. And then we're waiting until we get to waypoint 0. It should take about 43 minutes for this kind of gentle glide from 2.5 kilometers below to just 400 meters below. That'll take about 43 minutes until they arrive there.
Yeah, and if we hopefully have a good video of Dragon during that mid-course correction, you may see some small plumes coming off of the sides of the vehicle. That's those 12 service section Draco thrusters doing small attitude adjustments, just to make sure that we're coming to station as expected. Really small, minute corrections at this point. Kind of fun to see the
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground, just checking for a status on suit donning.
You're welcome to come back on board. We're both in our suits, and we're just finishing up the procedure now.
Copy, thank you. And can I get a comm check with Bob when he has a moment, please?
About to do that, maybe a minute or so.
Okay, sounds good.
So Bob and Doug finishing up their suit donning. At this point in their procedure, they will be seated in their suits. The feet of their suits actually have restraints that clip into the footrests. And so once they are complete with all their suit donning activities seated in the suits, then they'll be ready to work with SpaceX to do a pressure check on those on those IVA suits. That's intravehicular activity suits. And cool thing actually about the suits, so that the helmet is 3D printed, and the mics that they're doing their comm checks on are integrated into the body of the helmet. So all part of integrated design, and the suits have a single quick disconnect umbilical, as you might hear it called, that actually carries the either nitrox or oxygen, depending on the cabin pressure state, and the comm signals to and from the suits.
Yeah, and they're going to be in these suits through the duration of this docking procedure. Again, they're always just donning those suits for anything we consider kind of a dynamic operation. So obviously, they'll launch an ascent, the docking and undocking from the space station, and they'll be back in them when it's time for deorbit and landing at the end of their mission. Right now, though, Dragon and Station flying 260 statute miles over Nigeria. They're about to make a pass right over the central and northern parts of Africa and over the Sahara Desert. We're past the approach initiation burn that was done successfully. They'll do a mid-course burn in a little under 20 minutes from now. We're still about 40 minutes away from the arrival at waypoint 0. So at that point, Dragon will be exactly 400 meters directly beneath the International Space Station. On the way uphill, we're going to listen in for the teams in mission control.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground. Friendly reminder to please unlatch the toilet button before you get back in your seat.
Okay, we'll unlatch the toilet button.
Thank you.
Well, you know, as they mentioned earlier, it is a lived-in spacecraft. So, of course, as part of the life support system, you have to take care of those things about being human.
Now we're just keeping our eye on Dragon during this approach. It's in the approach initiation. Our next thing coming up is going to be that mid-course burn, coming in just a little over 18 minutes, or a little under 38.5 minutes away from the arrival at waypoint 0. That's going to be the first of 3 waypoints on our way to a docking today. Again, we were targeting about 7:30 a.m. over here on the West Coast for that docking. We might get there a little bit early, as they have been moving through a couple of these steps. We were able to do that approach initiation burn about 16 minutes ahead of the original timeline. So we might get a little bit early on the docking today. We do have a number of different steps, including a manual flight test, so it'll all depend on how that goes. But progressing smoothly. We may pause at waypoint 0. We may continue right along if everything's looking good with Dragon, and then they'll be able to move over to waypoint 1, which will place them just 220 meters away from the station.
And using to exercise that manual piloting test.
And it looks like the crew just has a couple of steps left until they're done getting into their suits, and then they'll go ahead and do another leak check. This will be the 3rd leak check they've done in these suits since their day started yesterday. They did an initial one when they got suited up in the operations and checkout facility down on the ground in Kennedy Space Center.
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground, we're complete 4.010.
Copy, complete with 4.010 for suit donning. At this point, you are go to begin your suit leak check procedure.
We'll put 4.011 in work.
And so with that, the crew are going to step into leak checks again. This is going to be their 3rd one. They've already done one when they initially got suited up in the operations and checkout facility, another one once they climbed into Dragon when it was still on the pad and connected their suits via umbilical to the seats in the Dragon spacecraft.
SpaceX Dragon in 2.2, we are ready to pressurize.
And Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon to ground, you are go to pressurize.
Okay, visors are down. We'll put that in work.
So now the crew going to step through and pressurize. Normally when the suits aren't pressurized, they can keep one of the zippers kind of just cracked open, and they're able to just flow cabin air through the spacesuit itself just to provide some cooling while they're inside. We can either flow nitrox into the suits. You could do that if you had a contaminated environment on board the Dragon spacecraft. It's something we also look for on the space station, and they had some air samplers out a little bit earlier, just looking for any trace contaminants in their breathing atmosphere. The suits also can have pure oxygen flown to them, or flowed to them, should the cabin itself depressurize. That'll happen below a certain PSI threshold, as we don't pressurize the suit all the way up to 14.7 psi if we're in a depressurized environment. Otherwise, you would be in essentially a pretty big balloon, and it'd be really hard to move. So they pressurize it to a much lower threshold, and just to make up for the lack of oxygen, therefore in a lower density air, you'd be flowing them pure oxygen. So those suits just serving as another barrier protection for the crew for anything like a contaminated atmosphere or a depressurized cabin inside Dragon. But crew suited up now. Sounds like we're about to step through these leak checks.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit there. So as you're listening to comms, there's some call outs for 4.010 and 4.011. Those are referring to procedures that the crew have on the spacecraft. So they have procedures built into their displays. These two just happen to be the two that they're running right now. They also have those on their tablets, so they can follow along there if they needed to. We were also talking a little bit about 14.7 psi. I know you and I both have engineering backgrounds, but if you don't have an engineering background, the atmospheric pressure at roughly sea level, sometimes referred to as 1 atmosphere, is roughly about 14.68 to 14.7 psi. So if you're at sea level right now, or pretty close to, what you're walking around in is 14 pounds per square inch of force about on your body. And that's roughly what the Dragon capsule is also at when they're flying up.
And while those leak checks are in work, the station itself is in the docking attitude. We get to do a pretty cool thing with station during the docking of the Crew Dragon. Normally the station's attitude, or which way it's pointing, is controlled by these very large gyroscopes called control moment gyros. And it's a pretty efficient way, only using electricity, to keep these large gyros spinning, pointing in opposite directions to help stabilize the station. It's a very large spacecraft, so using thrusters a little more work intensive. We actually switch over to the Russian thrusters during the initial docking of the Dragon spacecraft, and then after that...
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground, we saw 2 good leak checks.
And Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground, we saw the same. Great news, thanks.
And we just got confirmation, 2 good leak checks on those suits, so another milestone down as they continue their approach. But just to finish that thought, we're on Russian thrusters right now, controlling the attitude on board the space station. We'll flip over back to the control moment gyros, so those are over on the US segment once we make that initial soft capture, just because we don't want during that final pull in of that soft capture ring, before we get to that ready to latch, the thruster controls of the attitude can be a little bit more jarring. So we switch back over to the control moment gyros and then let Dragon resume its hard mate. But all that coming up in just about 2 hours, hopefully, away from our targeted docking time, right around 7:30 a.m. Pacific here in Hawthorne. But everything continuing to go well. We had that approach initiation burn happen about 16 minutes ahead of schedule. In just under 8 minutes from now, we'll do our mid-course burn, and then we're standing by for that arrival at waypoint 0 in just under 28 minutes from now.
Now on your screen is a view of the Dragon spacecraft from the International Space Station. We're on the sunlit side of the Earth, so daytime for those folks, middle of the day, I'm sure. Right now, actually, Dragon is just about to fly over the Caspian Sea. So if the clouds sort of break a little bit, we might get some cool views of planet Earth behind us. You know, once that suit lead check is complete, Bob and Doug might pop open their visors. Those can come open for their comfort. So you may hear some calls about that coming up here.
Right now, Dragon just continuing to close its way in. Right now we're about 2.5 kilometers away from the station, so just a little over 1.5 miles, closing in at a rate of about 3 meters per second, or about 6.7 miles per hour. The Cronus flight controller over in Houston, controlling this camera outside the station. He's controlling it from that mission control center on the ground, giving us a nice zoomed out view as the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station actually just flying over Kazakhstan. They are a few hundred miles to the west right now of Baikonur, which until yesterday has been the only gateway to orbit for our U.S. crew members to the International Space Station. So they're going to make a pass just to the north of Baikonur. We're looking at Kazakhstan in the background, but with this, a U.S. vehicle launched on a U.S. rocket from U.S. soil, now in the mix, a new era and a new path to station for our NASA crew members.
That's right. Actually, Chris Cassidy would have blasted off out of Baikonur not that long ago on a Soyuz vehicle, so he would have been launching from right where the crew are flying over right now.
But everything's still looking smooth with their trip up to station. We're about 4.5 minutes away from that mid-course burn. We should be arriving at waypoint 0, which we may pause out, we may go right past, depending on how all the Dragon systems are looking for the teams down here on the ground in Hawthorne and the team over in Mission Control Houston. We'll get to that waypoint 0 at about 24 minutes from now, and then continue on to waypoint 1, at which point we'll watch Dragon go from the bottom of the station, where it's going to be on what's known as the R bar, or the radial vector. That's if you drew a line straight through the International Space Station down to planet Earth. Dragon's going to be pausing or going right through 400 meters on that line, and then it's going to swing itself up out in front and align itself with the docking adapter on the Node 2 forward port, and they're going to pause at about 220 meters away from the station.
Yeah, right now Dragon is in a pointing mode that has it and its variety of guidance and navigation control sensors pointed directly at the station. Earlier on in the webcast, we actually got a few glimpses, I think, thermal images of the International Space Station. So we had a cool side-by-side of the space station and Dragon next to each other, views relative to each other. So those sensors are pointed at the station right now. Right now, Dragon's attitude control system is trying to maintain its attitude, null out any sort of roll or any sort of motion that it might pick up from just as it's flying towards the station. That's part of the reason we've had those great views looking at the.
Again, this will be their second manual piloting of the Dragon spacecraft. We were able to watch them yesterday.
Copy that. Ready.
Yesterday, shortly after getting on orbit, they were able to take control of Dragon and go through a number of pointing maneuvers or attitude adjustments. And in this case, they're going to be doing pretty much the second half of everything. When you're flying a spacecraft, you're worrying about attitude adjustments, and then you're worrying about translational adjustments. And this is going to be their chance to do those translational maneuvers.
Yeah, and once they finish that manual piloting test, then Dragon will take over. They'll transition and go towards waypoint 2. That'll put them just 20 meters away from space station.
All right, well, as we're just about 5.5 minutes to their arrival and quick pass through waypoint 0, let's jump over to Gary Jordan over at Mission Control Houston to check how everything's lining up with the teams in Houston for this approach and docking. Gary?
Thanks, Dan. Really good to see Dragon, Bob, and Doug inside of 500 meters, so close to the International Space Station, just flying through all of the milestones we have to get towards docking towards the International Space Station. A lot of prep work went into this moment. Just previously, we transitioned control of the station's attitude to Russian thrusters, also configured the station itself for the docking attitude. Chris Cassidy was just finishing up his midday meal. His next activity, just a little bit more than 20 minutes from now, will begin to set up for Dragon monitoring. He has a tool called the RPOP. We'll be able to display some of the telemetry data coming from Dragon through the C2V2. This is the common communication for visiting vehicles. It's established a link between the International Space Station and Dragon. Dragon's telemetry data, all the information being relayed through the International Space Station. And Cassidy will be able to monitor from this tool, again setting up in just about 20 minutes. Everything going according to plan from the International Space Station side of things, getting great views from Dragon of the International Space Station. Look at that, the lights reflecting from the outside of the International Space Station turned on. So Bob and Doug have a very clear view of the International Space Station. Should be entering into an orbital sunrise here shortly. From there, we'll take you through the next few maneuvers, again passing waypoint 1 and going right into that manual flight test. Again, everything here from Mission Control Houston, International Space Station configured for docking. Everything's go from our end. Back over to you in Hawthorne.
All right, thanks, Gary. We're jumping in now with Bob and Doug inside the Crew Dragon. Again, you're able to see what they're looking at on those displays there, and this a view from the Dragon spacecraft itself. You can see the International Space Station continuing to close in. Right now, they're only about 430 meters away. They're going to be quickly passing through waypoint 0 in the next 3 minutes, and they're going to continue their way up to waypoint number 1, which is going to be just about 220 meters out in front of the station itself.
That's to perform a manual piloting test. There is a very nice shot of the Dragon vehicle from cameras aboard the space station. You just saw one of the Draco thrusters there firing, just to keep it in that hold attitude, flying right in front of the station.
Yeah, we have 2 cameras on the very forward port of Node 2, so right where Dragon's going to be headed following the completion of this manual piloting test.
Dragon, SpaceX on Big Loop. C2V2 link reconfiguration is complete. The soft capture ring extension is also complete.
Dragon copies on the Big Loop. Good ring extension and C2V2 reconfig.
So those comms on the Big Loop, the core, the crew operations and resources engineer here at SpaceX letting the crew know that we have a good TDRS link again. Good C2V2 link again. It's common communications for visiting vehicles. And we actually heard a little bit earlier as well comms to Chris Cassidy to monitor this manual piloting test.
Dragon, SpaceX on Big Loop, you are go to execute the proximity manual flight test. Per procedure 4.041, and I have the target fuel levels when you are ready to copy.
You are go for 4.041, and we're ready to copy the fuel constraint.
Your 1/3 fuel usage will be 60.9, 2/3 58.9, and terminate 57.9.
We copy 60.9, 58.9, and 57.9. We'll pick up in 4.041.
Good copy, and we're with you.
All right, so they're going to start maneuvering Dragon again, making some translational maneuvers. We did get some insight that it looks like they're a little bit to the left of the docking axis right now, and so we should expect them to move directly into the center line as one of their first maneuver. That's going to be their very first maneuver, and then they have a strict list of choreographed steps just to test out moving on the other axes. And we heard the core Anna Menon calling up the expected fuel usage inside Dragon. They're going to be keeping a close eye on that just to make sure they're not overusing the propellant in those flight tests, making sure we still have good margins for all of the approach maneuvers, and then obviously for everything at the end of the mission itself.
Yeah, and the thrusters that we're using here.
Dragon, on the Big Loop, we are commencing with docking axis capture.
We are following along with you.
So the thrusters that we expect to see firing here would be on the service section or on the trunk. And you'll see some plumes coming out from the shot on your screen.
First part of this maneuver is just to really line them up perfectly with that docking axis. So they were already several meters off once this hold occurred, and so they're making very low impulse commands being sent to those Draco thrusters. Again, as Shiva was saying, there's the 12 around the lower part of the Dragon capsule that they're going to be using, and we're seeing small bursts now.
Yeah, and they actually have a couple of precision modes where they can put in sort of coarse and fine inputs into the vehicle. That's all stuff that they can control off of those touchscreen displays to get the right amount of impulsive thrust into the vehicle. If you're trying to get a little bit oriented to how the vehicle is positioned, that's the nose cone on the top of your screen. So Bob and Doug would be sitting sort of underneath that nose cone inside the pressurized portion of the capsule, and their seats look up into the displays and also would look towards the side hatch, which is currently sealed underneath on the opposite side of where that nose cone is. Very cool to see those thruster plumes.
Yeah, the Kronos emission control Houston actually opened up the iris a little bit on that camera on the space station so we could see these plumes.
And SpaceX Dragon, we've completed the docking axis capture maneuver. We're going to move on to the YZ translation.
Copy, we're with you.
All right, sounds like they've got themselves lined up exactly on the docking axis, so directly in front of that international docking adapter on node 2. Now they're going to begin some lateral and axial maneuvers. So again, just putting Dragon now off the docking axis, and to just continue these translational maneuvers. So at this point, we should see them head up to the right and up from this view, as they're just making very small adjustments in the Dragon's positioning in front of the space station right now.
And here comes the translation.
We copy.
Yeah, in the data, it looks like we're seeing the 6 thrusters essentially on the bottom of the spacecraft right now from this view, lighting up. So it's going to begin to move them straight up. And it's difficult to tell, but there is a very slow drift upward right now.
Yeah, it looks like they're going about 0.1 meters a second, if I'm looking at this data correctly. So very slow and steady. And they will probably do a quick correction to stop that upward movement.
Both came from military test pilot backgrounds. Bob Behnken, the Air Force. Doug Hurley, a Marine Corps aviator.
And then I believe Naval Test Pilot School, so little bit overexposed there, but you can still see the thrusters firing.
Yeah, our Kronos working to do that deliberately for us so we can see those thruster plumes from this camera view. We're at a normal exposure, so not able to see those jets into the darkness of space. But when we do overexpose a little bit, you're able to see those thruster plumes coming out of the Dragon spacecraft.
It's actually something interesting about both aircraft and rockets. When you consider the coordinate system, what we refer to as the x-axis is usually the one that goes through the nose. So in the case of Falcon 9 and Dragon sitting on top of each other, the x-axis would have been pointing through the nose cone going up. That's can be a little bit counterintuitive. And actually in aircraft, the z-axis usually points down, depending on whether you use European or American coordinate systems and the type of aircraft you're working on. But important for both the space station and Dragon to be on the same coordinate system as they do this eventually as they step into the approach maneuvers here towards waypoint 2. Dragon will be using its relative navigation sensors, again, for relative position to the station, to make sure that it's on the approach, within the bounds of the approach corridor going towards the station when we get to that after this manual piloting test.
We should be getting to that shortly. This manual piloting test was slated to last about 25 minutes. As we have been running ahead of schedule today with all of Dragon's maneuvers, we could be looking at a docking only about 25 or 30 minutes from now. So once they're done with this manual flight test, they'll turn control back over to Dragon's flight computers and they'll resume their approach, which had actually already started automatically before the crew issued a hold command to the vehicle. And then they'll press in to arrive at waypoint number 2, at which point the teams will do a final go, no-go for docking. They'll depart that 20-meter hold point, and it should be just about 5 minutes following that departure until we get contact and captured.
Yeah, and the crew right now are seated in Dragon in the pilot and commander's seat. Both of them are suited for what are relatively dynamic maneuvers. And they'll continue to be suited until we have confirmation of good hard capture on the space station. That kind of gives you an indication of sort of how the design process works. You know, Bob and Doug have had lots of opportunities to test this out and sim it and give their feedback. And pretty cool to hear that their sim experience was very similar to what they saw actually on orbit. Just, I think you said 170 meters away from the station right now?
Yeah, we're just 176, and I imagine as a spacecraft designer, that's exactly what you want to hear, is the way that I trained you in it here on the ground is exactly how it performed once you're there for the real thing. So the second manual piloting test in the books, Bob and Doug putting Dragon through its paces. Now we're time to put it all to where we get to our endpoint. We're ready to get Dragon docked to the International Space Station.
Dragon SpaceX on Big Loop. The ground will be resuming approach shortly. We do plan to hold briefly at waypoint 2, so reminder that crew visors down are not required until the ground is preparing to command the final approach.
Yeah, you can see the trajectory of the spacecraft. There are small corrections that are happening. So if the as we get closer and closer to station. We're trying to stay within those two corridors, which are shown coming out of the docking port that we're going towards. That little dot, I think, was the 20-meter hold point, so that's where we expect there to be the spacecraft holding right in front of the International Docking Adapter. There'll be a go, no-go pole. The ground teams have worked hard over the past probably years to come up with a set of what we call flight rules. So those are technical constraints, items that we look for, that if any of those criteria were violated, then we have a rule that we've predetermined, gives us guidance to say whether we could approach or not. So far, our vehicle has been very healthy, but technical ground teams will all do their due diligence to make sure that it's still safe to approach.
Right, and at this moment, that approach is continuing, still moving in at about 0.3 of a meter per second. Dragon's coming up on just 100 meters away from the space station.
So the very top there is the nose cone on the spacecraft, where we've got a cool view. Left side of your screen is the International Space Station. Right side of your screen is Dragon.
We're inside 100 meters, continuing to close. Again, we're going to have a short hold at 20 meters. Teams will just do a final check, and then they'll give Dragon the go. We're expecting it to be pretty brief. We should get to that hold point in just about 4 minutes, moving at our current pace.
I think you can see a meatball and American flag on that on the spacecraft. The NASA logo, of course, referred to as the meatball. I think there was some spirited discussion about the meatball versus the worm during ascent. And those are, you can see those logos. That structure on the fairing structure is actually what the Super Dracos are housed in. Of course, all of those are deactivated now, only used for launch escape during the ascent portion. Nose cone right at the top of the vehicle, and you can see sort of the sealing surface. Those four circular slots right underneath the nose cone within that red ring are the forward bulkhead Dracos. That's what we were using while we were conducting all those burns, the 5 burns to get to this point. Right now, we don't have a reason to use those. We'll only be making small attitude corrections with the service section Dracos. And you can see the service section actually pretty clearly here too. There's a black portion and a white portion sort of separated by a fin. The black portion is solar panels, solar cells that'll charge Dragon's batteries, and the bottom side are the white portion is actually a thermal radiator that's used to keep the spacecraft nice and cool. Of course, the avionics and the cabin, making sure that Bob and Doug are comfortable inside.
Looks like we're getting a shadow cast. We are just 60 meters away, continuing to close in, just about 40 meters to go until we're at that hold point. Should get there in just over 2 minutes. Meanwhile, teams in Hawthorne and in Houston doing their internal go, no go for docking. They're going to get all the teams pulled. Once everyone's go, we'll be able to give Dragon the final go ahead for the vehicle to autonomously fly in and dock with the International Space Station. Should be coming up on waypoint 2 arrival in just about 1 minute 45 seconds. At this point, it'll be 20 meters away from that docking port. The International Docking Adapter number 2 attached to pressurized mating adapter number 2 at the very forward end of the Harmony module.
Right there on the right around the center, you can see the forward hatch. It's got a window in it. You can see a couple of handles, and there's some features that look sort of bronze-ish. Those are the pedals that we were talking about earlier as part of the soft capture system. So pretty wild too to see. We're so close that we're getting shadows from the station on Dragon. Wow.
And we're getting these views of Dragon's approach from 2 cameras that are right next to that docking adapter. And the movement's a little jarring at times. These cameras are being commanded by person at the Cronus console in Mission Control Houston, and they send some very basic function commands to the camera, which it then executes automatically. And so they're continuing to follow Dragon in, so we do thank them for their diligence to give us these views of this historic moment as we are just less than 30 meters away from docking.
Right above the NASA meatball logo, you can see three of the service section Draco thrusters.
That's right, 12 in all. So the 4 of those clusters spread around the vehicle, used for a lot of the attitude control and any small translational maneuvers like we just watched Bob and Doug execute with their second manual flight test.
Yeah, and actually oriented in a way too where if you were to lose some of those thrusters, you still have redundancy and control in those axes. That's part of the reason why they're sort of at the angles that they are.
All right, so we should be getting to waypoint 2 right now. So it looks like we do have that hold.
SpaceX on Big Loop. The ground is go for approach 2. We will be enabling the resume shortly. As a reminder, ensure your visors are closed prior to Dragon's departure from the waypoint. And once Dragon is inside, the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted. And for your awareness, we have sunset in a little less than 8.5 minutes.
Copies all on the Big Loop. Go for docking.
So Doug on Spacecraft confirming their go for docking. They're going to put down their visors. Got some instructions there about the crew hands-off point that we had talked about earlier. That's a point where we don't want the crew issuing any commands to the vehicle. It's about just about 2 meters away from the docking adapter. I believe the number is about 1.7 meters.
Station Houston on the Big Loop. Houston and station are now go for docking. Chris, you can monitor for steps 3 and 4. 3 and 4 in 1.104 Crew Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Steps 3 and 4.
Next Dragon on the Big Loop. Our visors are down.
Copy, visors down.
With the crew confirming their visors down, we should see the final approach resume.
Dragon on the Big Loop. We are inbound from approach 2.
Copy, inbound.
Station copy.
And we're going to be racing that sunset. The approach has resumed. Dragon closing in. We're inside 20 meters. And yeah, that crew hands-off point should come up in about 3 minutes or so. Right before we get that final docking, it comes about 20 seconds prior, or just about 2 meters away from the station still. And that's just the crew not issuing any abort commands. At that point, it would be too late. And so any aborts would be executed automatically by Dragon itself. So we're closing in at less than 1/10 of a meter per second at this point.
You can see the service section Draco is just doing all these very small, minor attitude corrections. Really, the autonomous docking system at work, making sure that the vestibule and the self-capture system is lined up with IDA2. It's the International Docking Adapter. You can see much more clearly there the hinge mechanism for the nose cone, those 4 black circles are the forward bulkhead Dracos, not to be used at this time. And then, of course, the pedals of the soft capture system. Wow.
Dragon on the big loop, we're inside 10 meters. We cannot make out the docking target, but we do see the outline.
We copy and concur, 10 meters.
Right, we're less than 10 meters away. Again, we're closing at that rate of less than 1/10 of a meter per second. We should be just about 1 minute 45 seconds away from docking.
There is a centerline camera right in that middle, so that you can see where the forward hatch is, and right in the middle of that there's a window, and there's a centerline camera that is aligned with the center of the vehicle and the center of the docking mechanism. So that is what the autonomous docking system is using to line up with sort of a cross-hatch, cross-target on the docking port. Again, the forward docking port on PMA2, or the pressurized mating adapter.
And we are just 5 meters away. Again, we're racing that sunset. This Dragon continues to close, 4 meters to go.
Those shadows of the space station on the vehicle. Yeah, you can actually see the centerline camera pretty clearly there, sort of with the contrast of the sun right now.
3 meters to go. Two meters. We are inside the hands-off point, the chop, the crew hands-off point. 1 meter to go. Soft capture complete.
Dragon in space. Soft capture confirmed. Stand by for retraction and docking.
Bye.
And we just heard it, soft capture. We have docking, that coming at 7:16 a.m. Pacific time, with the station and Dragon flying 262 statute miles right over the border between northern China and Mongolia.
You saw a little bit of motion there of Dragon. That was that relative motion that the soft capture system is damping out. Once that motion is clear, then the soft capture system will be retracted, and Dragon will go for hard capture.
Again, if just now tuning in, that soft capture, that docking coming 7:16 a.m. Pacific, 10:16 a.m. over on the East Coast. Dragon and the International Space Station were flying 262 statute miles right over the border between northern China and Mongolia. So that soft capture ring now going to retract. It's one more step on the way to docking complete.
On board.
Yeah, and so the next step here is once the soft capture ring is retracted, there are 12 latches that we refer to as hard capture latches. Those are what will really create that pressure tight seal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. So once soft capture is complete, and I believe we'll get that call from our core here, Anna, then we'll get confirmation of hard capture, and the crew, of course, aboard have this information on their displays, so they'll also see indication of hard capture complete. And once those two steps are done, then that's docking complete.
That's right. We're expecting to hear some words from everybody. A pretty monumental moment. I mean, for Doug Hurley, he's returning to where he last docked almost 9 years ago on the very last space shuttle mission, now commanding the very first commercial spacecraft to deliver astronauts to the International Space Station.
That's got to be cool for them. They've mentioned quite a few times that they're best friends. Our favorite dads in space, as we've been calling them. This has got to be really cool for them. It's got to be really cool for their families too, watching this.
It looks like we have another quick handover. We'll get that video back shortly. We're about 75% complete already with that retraction. Once that retraction is completed, we'll keep an eye out for the 12 ready to hook indicators. Once those are ready, those 12 hooks will begin to engage, and that'll securely attach Dragon to the International Space Station.
Yeah, so right now the vehicle confirming that the soft capture system is deployed correctly and is fully retracted. And then once the soft capture system is fully retracted, that'll set up the vehicle to put in the hard capture pins. There's 12 of those around the docking ring, and that's what creates that airtight seal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. The volume between, which we refer to as the vestibule, is currently not pressurized. Of course, it was just exposed to the vacuum of space until literally minutes ago, about 4 minutes ago. So just waiting for the vehicle to get that.
Dragon SpaceX, ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
All right, so we see those ready to hook indicators are lighting up green. So we should be just about to step into those 12 hooks beginning to engage to get that secure mate between Dragon and the International Docking Adapter on the space station.
Wow, right now those two vehicles are flying together. They are attached to each other.
It's been just under 19 hours since we lifted off. We're actually at about 18 hours, 58 minutes, and 42 seconds. So we promised about a 19-hour ride up to station, and we made it just a few minutes before that. They were able to dock a few minutes ahead of schedule. We were tracking them to still take about another 10 minutes, but able to step through all of their burns about 16 minutes ahead of schedule and get us to where we are now. If you missed it just a few moments ago, that initial docking coming at 7:16 a.m. Pacific, 10:16 a.m. over on the east coast of the United States, and they were 262 statute miles flying together over the northern border of China and Mongolia. So really exciting. We're just waiting for this docking complete to be confirmed. We're expecting to hear some words, obviously, from the crew on board and all the excited teams down here. We're just waiting for this moment. And then it's time to start getting Dragon integrated into the station. There will be an umbilical that will get mated, and that'll allow Dragon to flow data and power into the station systems, and then it'll be over to the crew.
Endeavour on station at Houston on the Big Loop. MCS is configured. We're proceeding with hook driving.
All right, and they did a quick, so the motion control system onboard station now back under those control moment gyros, so handed over from the Russian thrusters, and Dragon now given the go to drive those hooks. We have to do that changeover of attitude control before we drive those hooks, as the Russian thrusters a little bit more dynamic in their control of attitude, and if you had a thruster firing while you were starting to drive those hooks, that could miss a line. So going over to the smoother control moment gyros on the US side, now controlling the attitude on board the station, and those hooks, those 12 hooks on Dragon, about to start driving.
Right now, Dragon and ISS attached, just flying off the east coast of China, just underneath Japan. Attached to each other. We recently passed over to the orbital night, so we're on the currently the dark side of the world. And actually, we're lucky enough to see soft capture happen just as we were crossing over the Terminator line.
And if you're wondering what you're looking at, this is one of the cameras on the very outboard part of the Japanese experiment module, looking back in towards the very front part of Node 2, where Dragon is currently docked. We are in an orbital nighttime, that's why everything is so dark, but you're looking at Dragon. It is
Again, there are 12 of those along the ring. And that helps us ensure that we have an airtight seal. It is vacuum around them right now, so we want to make sure we're keeping all of that valuable life support in the vehicle. Now the combined ISS Dragon vehicle.
Meanwhile, inside the capsule, Bob and Doug also standing by for this hard capture to complete. And once we have that docking complete call, they'll be able to start stepping through a number of procedures to get them ready to move into the International Space Station. They'll get the go-ahead to doff or get out of their suits, and then they'll have some activities on the Dragon side to prepare for the hatch opening. Chris Cassidy will mainly be working on the station side to pressurize the vestibule. So as Shiv has talked about, the space between the Dragon capsule and the space station was exposed to vacuum, and even after this tight seal has occurred, we'll still be at vacuum inside. So we'll actually open up a valve to supply air from the station side into that space between the Dragon and station hatchways, and they'll get it up to the same ambient pressure that we'll have inside of Dragon and on the station itself. They'll wait for it to thermally balance out, make sure we don't have any temperature swings as we're bringing it up from vacuum, so probably from a very cold temperature up to about 72 degrees that they have in their cabin temperature on board the station, and then we'll get the hatches open.
Dragon SpaceX, hard capture complete. Stand by for docking completion.
And now that hard capture is complete, so that's confirmation of those 12 latches to create that airtight seal. Now that's complete, the umbilicals from the station side will interface with the Dragon vehicle umbilicals, and that'll provide power and communications through space station directly to Dragon. Pretty much the whole way up, Dragon's been using a combination of batteries and its solar cells pointed at the sun to make sure that it has enough electrical power for the journey up.
And we're just standing by now for that umbilical to get mated, and that's gonna, again, as Shiv was just saying, start the power and data transfer between Dragon and the space station. They've been transmitting data through RF radio frequency on the way uphill, and during the final approach, this will give a hard mate, basically a wired LAN connection between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station itself, and then also being able to draw power from the station systems using those great big solar arrays that are used to generate all of the electricity for systems on board the station. The soft capture system has been stowed. We see the umbilical starting to deploy. About 40% of the way so far, going pretty quickly. Should just take a couple more seconds until we're all the way connected. And then we should be getting that docking complete call out from the core here in Mission Control, SpaceX and Hawthorne. Standing by.
Dragon, SpaceX docking sequence is complete.
Dragon, we copy docking complete. To say that it's been a real honor to be just a small part of this 9-year endeavor since the last time the United States spaceship has docked with the International Space Station. We have to congratulate the men and women of SpaceX at Hawthorne, McGregor, and at Kennedy Space Center. Their incredible efforts over the last several years to make this possible cannot go overstated. I'd also like to thank Kathy Leaders and her team of the Commercial Crew Program of NASA. An outstanding job by everyone. Last, I'd like to thank the men and women of the National Aeronautics and Space Agency. This is an incredible time to be at NASA. 3 new vehicles to be flown, continuing mission in low Earth orbit, and then to the moon and Mars. We thank you again and congratulate you.
Dragon arriving. Crew of Expedition 63 is honored to welcome Dragon and the Commercial Crew Program to welcome aboard the International Space Station. Bob and Doug, glad to have you as part of the crew. Well done. Bravo Zulu.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Endeavour, this is Houston. Bob and Doug, welcome to the International Space Station after your spectacular rendezvous and docking of the first Crew Dragon vehicle. For the first time since the retirement of the Space Shuttle, you've completed a historic ride to the ISS and have opened up a new chapter in human space exploration. On behalf of the flight control teams here in Houston and in Hawthorne, California, and to our SpaceX colleagues, bravo on a magnificent moment in spaceflight history and on the start of a new journey that has changed the face of space travel in this new era of space transportation. Bob and Doug, good luck, and we look forward to working with you on board.
Dragon, SpaceX, Bob and Doug, we here at SpaceX are honored to have been part of ushering in this new era of human spaceflight. On behalf of the SpaceX and NASA partnership, congratulations on a phenomenal accomplishment and welcome to the International Space Station.
Well, thank you, Anna. We appreciate all the good words and everyone thanking us, but it truly was a magnificent effort by the entire team, the SpaceX team, the NASA team, and a team across America who was able to pull this off and bring human spaceflight again to our nation. Thanks for everything. Happy to be aboard.
And Dragon, SpaceX, with that, ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. We will be configuring your video to go external shortly, and we have one request for Bob's suit doffing when you're ready to copy.
We copy all. Go ahead for Bob's suit.
During your approach suit leak check, we noticed Bob's suit pass with a lower PSID than his previous vehicle and O&C checks. We still had plenty of margin to support you in a depress, but in order to rule out potential hardware issues, when Bob is doffing, after he opens his structural zipper, check all 3 bladder zipper heads to see if any are partially closed. It is possible that if the head is backed off slightly, that the white tooth is partially visible or a small gap can be seen between the end of the zipper head and the gasket end. Please report observations.
Copy. Bob will take a close look at his zippers when he docks, and he'll get doffing first, so we'll let you know as soon as we see something or if we see something.
Great. Thank you so much.